Good evening. I hope you're all doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Gittin, and we're learning Maseches Gittin Daf Vav, and we're starting about a quarter of the way down at the two dots. And the Gemara today is going to be discussing a whole host of sugyas, some of which is connected to our previous conversations about the machlokes between Rabba and Rava. Rabba was of the opinion that the reason why we have to say B'fanai nechtav or B'fanai nechtam from Medinas Hayam when a get is brought from outside of Eretz Yisrael to inside of Eretz Yisrael is out of concern that it wasn't written lishma, that it wasn't written specifically for this particular woman. And Rava was of the opinion that there's no way to verify the get. This is the machlokes that we have. But we're going to start today with a little bit of a different aspect of our Mishnah, and that is a discussion about Bavel. The Gemara opens it, Mar Bavel, in regards to Bavel, Rav Amar Ke'eretz Yisrael Gittin, Shmuel Amar Kechutz La'aretz. Achlokas Rav and Shmuel. Rav was of the opinion that we treat Bavel like Eretz Yisrael as it relates to Gittin. And Shmuel's of the opinion that it's chutzlaretz. What's the difference? B'fanai nechtav u'b'fanai nechtam. According to Rav, who says that Bavel's like Eretz Yisrael, you don't need to say b'fanai nechtav u'b'fanai nechtam. But according to Shmuel, who says that it's like chutzlaretz, then it's no different than any other form of Medinas Hayam, where a person is obligated to say b'fanai nechtav u'b'fanai nechtam. And says the Gemara Lema b'hakamiflige, perhaps the machlokes between Rav and Shmuel is as follows: Demar savar lefi she'ein b'kiyin lishma. According to one shita, maybe it's all because of a concern of lishma, and v'hani gmiri. Maybe the deeper concern about b'fanai nechtam is one of lishma, but here these people are already learned, so there's nothing to worry about. That would be, of course, the shita of Rav. Umar savar lefi she'ein edim mitzuyin l'kaimo v'hani nami lo shchichi. But here, perhaps the other shita would hold that our concern is verification of the shtar, and we can't do that. And here we can't do that because there's no travel from one place to another, and that would be the shita of Shmuel. So says the Gemara, but Tizbara, is it logical to assume that there are party lines of Rabba versus Rava? We've already said a couple of times, Harava isle de Rava. Rabba has a blended shita. Rabba doesn't say that the only reason why we say b'fanai nechtav or b'fanai nechtam is only because of lishma. He also agrees with Rava's concern that efshar l'kaimo, that there's no way to verify the get, and therefore he holds a multiple opinions. So therefore you can't explain this machlokes Rav and Shmuel in clear party lines of Rabba versus Rava, because Rabba himself agrees with Rava. So therefore, Ella says the Gemara a third of the way down to Kuliyam Labin and Lakaimo. Everyone knows that it has to be Mekuyim, that we have to be able to verify the get. But Rav Savar Kevandikim Mesifta Mishkach Shchiche. Rav says that because in Bavel there are a lot of yeshivas, we know there were a lot of yeshivas, and it was a bastion of Torah back in the day, in the times of the Amoraim, Mamash Makom Torah. So therefore, Mishkach Shchiche, people are going to be familiar with signatures. However, Shmuel Savar note Mesivta Bigir Saihu treaty that each yeshiva is going to be so immersed in the sugyas that they're learning, they won't be able to think about anything else. They certainly won't recognize other people's signatures. And this is a machlokes. Maybe it's a machlokes about how yeshivas are run, that according to Rav, it seemed to be the case that the yeshivas were a little more worldly. They knew what other people's signatures looked like. They were interacting with the people around them. Mashain came in regards to Shmuel's yeshiva, the Girsaihu treaty, they were totally immersed in their learning. The Gemara says halfway down, Itmar Nami. This, we have another comment in the Amoraim about this. Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rav Huna, Asinu Atzmeinu Bebavel Ke'eretz Yisrael Gittin Michi Asa Rav LeBavel. From the time that Rav came to Bavel, we made ourselves like Eretz Yisrael. In other words, that if a get is brought from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, then you do not have to say B'fanai nechtav or B'fanai nechtam, because it's like Eretz Yisrael. It's not treated like Chutz La'aretz. Says the Gemara, it's really not so simple to treat Bavel that way, not in regards to the concept of whether or not they're learned, but there's a physical constraint that really causes a problem. What's the problem? Says the Gemara, Masiv Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Huda Omer may reckon the Mizrach v'rekem kimizrach. We learned in our Mishnah that there are borders of Eretz Yisrael as it relates to Gittin, and Rekem was one border. Ume Ashkelon l'darim v'Ashkelon kedarim, and Ashkelon was another border. Me Akko l'tzafon v'Akko kitzafon, and Akko was the northern border, and Akko was considered to be outside the border. So says the Gemara, that's a problem. V'habavel l'tzfon Eretz Yisrael kaima. We know that Bavel is north of Eretz Yisrael because this is pasuk is in reference to Bavel, and it refers to it as being north. V'tznan, and we also have a Mishnah, Reb Meir Omer Akko Keretz Yisrael Gittin, v'afilu Reb Meir lo kamer ala be'Akko demekarva, aval Bavel demerach kalo. So even Akko, where some people say that Akko is included, our Mishnah doesn't. But even Reb Meir, who says that Akko it's still the border city, but it's Ad Ve'ad Bechlal, it's included in Eretz Yisrael. Even he who includes Akko only does so because of its proximity to Eretz Yisrael. But Bavel's, I don't know, many hundreds of miles away. So therefore, how can you say, what's the Havamina to say that just because Rav showed up in Bavel, so it's therefore the case that it's treated like Eretz Yisrael, but just in geography, it doesn't work. So the Gemara says, "Humosiv la v'humefarik." Well, he asked the question and he answered it. And the Gemara says, "Levarmi Bavel." When we spoke about Chutz La'aretz, you're right geographically that it's north of Eretz Yisrael. Leisman de Palik. Look on any globe, of course, Bavel is going to be there. What we're saying is that Bavel is an exception to the rule because there were a lot of Talmidei Chachamim. Very good. What are the boundaries of Bavel? Ad Heichan Hi Bavel. So this is going to be a little foreign to us, and in the next Masechta we'll dig into this a little bit more. The Gemara says 2/3 of the way down, Amar Papa Kimachlokes liyuchzin kach machlokes ligittin. Whatever the halachic standards were in regards to how we define Bavel as it relates to Yuchzin, the same is true by Gittin. Rabbi Yosef Amar no machlokes liyuchzin. Aval Gittin divrei akol ad arba tinyona de gishra. There is a machlokas about Yuchzin, and really that's not the parameters that we use for Yuchzin are not shaykh by the world of Gittin. But we do have, at least in one of the directions of Bavel, a very clear upper limit in a particular location, which is Arba Tinyona de Gishra. It's a swamp by the second bridge. Okay, a very specific location, very difficult for us to appreciate, because I'm certain that that bridge doesn't exist anymore. It would be 2,000 years old. The Gemara tells a story about a couple of cities within Bavel. Rav Chizda matrich me'aktisvon lebei Ardashir, umi be'Ardashir le'aktisvon. So there, Rav Chizda was matrich. Sorry, let me read that again. Rav Chizda was matrich from me'aktisvon lebei Ardashir, but umi be'Ardashir le'aktisvon lo matrich. He only required it in one direction. He didn't require it in both directions. Says the Gemara, perhaps lema kosabra lefishain b'kein lishma b'hanig miri. Maybe we can say that according to the one who's concerned about Lishma, and these people are learned, therefore you don't have to say B'fanai Nechtam or B'fanai Nechtam because it's Bavel and it's a city that people are learned. Says the Gemara, stop with the party lines. There's no longer a Shita like that. There's no purist Shita anymore that we're only concerned about Lishma. Because what does the Gemara say? B'tizbara, how can you possibly say that that's a real Shita after all? The Rabba Isle de Rava. Rava is a blended sheet. Rabba is a blended Shita. So you can no longer say that it's just a question of Rabba. So the Gemara says, Ella, you're right. How do we understand this comment of Rav Chizda? The Kule Alma Ba'inan Lakaimo. Everyone, Rabba, everybody agrees that we are concerned about the ability to verify again. V'hani came to Azle, the Shuka Lahasam. So because one of the people goes to the other people to shop, so they are signing shtaros all the time. You sign your credit card. They begin, when you're there every week for Shabbos, people begin to recognize your signatures, but the other people don't know. So it's only one directional. So if we look back in the Gemara, we can see what direction it is. We had said in the Gemara in the name of Rav Chizda a few lines ago that from Aktisfon to Be'ar Dashir, that you have to sign, because they don't recognize. But from Be'ar Dashir, from Aktisvon, the Shuk, the marketplace was in Aktisvon. So then, Lo Matrich, then you don't have to say B'fanai Nechta, B'fanai Nechta. My time. But what's the reason why the people were really not paying attention? Why is it that some were Matrich and some were not Matrich between these two communities? Because Bishukai Hutri, the people who are very busy in the store, the shoppers are not necessarily noticing the sellers when they're just shopping, sign and move on. So they don't know. Therefore, we made a distinction between signing from Be'ar Dashir and Aktisvon in one direction versus the other. The Gemara says 6-7 lines from the bottom. Rabba Baravua Matzrich Me Arsa La Arsa. He was so makbid that he would say that from one row of houses to another, that would be enough of a distance to require B'fanai Nechta B'fanai Nechta. Rav Sheshes Matzrech Mishchuna L'Shchuna. Rav Sheshes was a little more mekel, and he said from one community to the next, we're obligated to say B'fanai Nechta B'fanai Nechta. The Rava Matzrech Ba'osa Shchuna. Rava within one Shchuna also required more machmer than the previous Shita. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. 4 lines from the bottom. Rava, as we saw in Daf Beis, he's the one who was concerned about Mitzuyin L'Kaimo. Says the Gemara, Shani b'nei mechoza. B'nei mechoza were very different. Really, Rava shouldn't have been concerned about this because they all live in the same neighborhood. So I conceptually know my neighbor's handwriting and they know mine. We sign shtaros together all the time. But here, this community where Rava was saying that we do require Befanai Nechtam, but Befanai Nechtam was a very unique community. What was the community? Says the Gemara, Shani b'nei mechoza, the city of Mechoza was different than 90. People would travel a lot. Ledugma, just as a modern day example. If you can imagine a community, this is true throughout areas in Florida, where most of the houses are Airbnb, and the people who stay there are there for as long. So you don't know the neighbors. You have no idea who they are. They change every 20 minutes. They change every morning. There's new neighbors, new cars, new people. So in a community like Bnei Mechoza, where people were very transient, so therefore there was an obligation, even according to Rava, to say B'fanai Nechtam B'fanai Nechtam, even though normally he would say that because you live in the same Dalet Amos, you know each other's signatures. It's not true in this case. The Gemara says 3 lines from the bottom. Rav Chanan Mishta'im, Rav Kahana was talking, and he said, Rav Kahana Aisi Kita, V'lo Yadana Imisura L'Naharda Iminarda L'Sura. So Rav Chanan was telling a story about Rav Kahana that there was a get that was brought, and we don't know what direction the get was brought. Was it from Surah to Narda, or was it from Narda to Surah? So Asa L'Kamei de Rav, they went and they asked a Shaila to Rav. They go to the Rebbe. Do we have to say in this case where the get was going from Surah to Narda or from Narda to Surah? Again, we don't know which one. What did Rab say? Lo tzrichas. You do not need to say turning to the top of Daf Yomi Beis because he avadit ahanis. You don't need to, but if you say it, it will be helpful. What does this mean? It says the Gemara, "Mai avadis ahanis." What does it mean that if you don't need to say it, but if you would say it, it would be helpful? So it says the Gemara on Bava Midbeis on the second line, that the power of saying b'fanai nechtam b'fanai nechtam, even in a case where it may not be required, is that it kind of sets up a brick wall so that if the husband wants to say, no, there's a psul in the get and I don't want to divorce you anymore, she can say, I'm sorry. The shliach said b'fanai nechtam b'fanai nechtam. You no longer have any latitude to do so. So that's what the Gemara says. The asi bal me'arer lo mashkechinan beit. Tanya, where do we see this in halachic literature that this is the case, that it's helpful to have the shliach say b'fanai nechtam b'fanai nechtam? The Gemara says ma'aseh be'adam echad shehevi get lifnei Rabbi Yishmael. There's a story of a person who brought a get before Rabbi Yishmael. Amar lo, they said to Rabbi Yishmael, tzarech ani lomar b'fanai nechtam b'fanai nechtam o enu tzarech? O eni tzarech? Do I need to say b'fanai nechtam b'fanai nechtam or not? Amar lo, b'ni, my child, mehechan ato, where are you from? Amar lo, Rabbi, he says, my Rabbi, I'm from the following community, mikvar sisoi ani. Amar lo, tzarech ato lomar b'fanai nechtam b'fanai nechtam shelo tizkak la'edim. He said, you need to say b'fanai nechtam b'fanai nechtam so that you won't need edim later to combat the husband. Says the Gemara, la'achar sheyotza, after the person who was asking the shayla left Rabbi Shmuel's presence, so nichnas the fun of Rabbi Eloi. Rabbi Eloi went to Rabbi Shmuel and said, I don't understand. Amar lo, Rabbi, I don't understand. It's even closer than Akko. By Akko, we have a machlokas between our Tanakama and Rav Meir, as we saw earlier today. But here, in regards to Kfar Sisai, Pashat, that it should be part of Eretz Yisrael. So why are you saying that he's obligated to say B'fanai Nechtam or B'fanai Nechtam in order to prevent Edim? It says the Gemara. Let's continue the question. But now we also know Rav Meir Omer Akko ke Eretz Yisrael again. Ve'afilu Rabbanan lo pliki alei to Rav Meir el be'Akko de Merachko about Kfar Sisai de Mekar below. Nobody argues in regards to Kfar Sisai. So Rabbi Shmuel, why are you saying that you need to say b'fanai nechtam or b'fanai nechtam when it comes to Kfar Sisai? So Amar lo, shtok v'nishtok. Rabbi Shmuel says back to Rabbi Eloi, he says to him, my son, please stop talking. Ho liyatza davar beheter yatza. Ha ihunami shelo tizkak le'edim ka'amar le, lo saimuha kame. Says the Gemara, what was it that was going on? He said, be quiet, because there's already something good that took place here, that they've already gotten divorced. So we need to leave it. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. The whole point over here is to say that there's no need for Edom. So just say that. Why are you saying that he has to say b'fanai nechtam b'fanai nechtam? Just make sure she knows the halachos. It says the Gemara, says the Gemara, no, lo saimua kame, says the Gemara, ka'amar le, lo saimua kame, he just hadn't heard the end of the sentence. And really, yes, they did need to say b'fanei nechtam b'fanei nechtam, and the part that he hadn't heard was in regards to the benefits of it, that it prevents a husband from being ma'ar on again. Shalach le Rav Evyasar le Rav Chizda. Rav Evyasar asked the question. We'll see soon how great Rav Evyasar actually was. He said that we no longer need Gittin to say b'fanei nechtam b'fanei nechtam from Medinas Hayam to Eretz Yisrael. So says the Gemara, Lema, perhaps perhaps it's because. And again, I don't know why the Gemara keeps repeating this question, but it's really just to drill home this point. Perhaps we should say that really the whole sugya in our Mishnah is about the Shema. And now that Bavel is very well versed, so Rav Evyasar is saying, no need, everybody in Bavel knows the din, so let's move forward. So says the Gemara, that is not happening anymore. Halfway down on Daf Vav Beis B'Tizbara, is it logical to assume that that's the case? After all, the Rabba Isle, the Rabba, we know that Rabba has a blended shita, where he has a dual concern in regards to why we say b'fanei nechtam b'fanei nechtam. Part A is lishma, and part B is a concern about edim mitzuyim l'kaimo. Ella, it must therefore be that what is the right way to understand this sugya of Rav Evyasar, where he says that we no longer need to have b'fanei nechtam from Medinas Hayam to Eretz Yisrael. Says the Gemara, really our concern, like both Rabba and Rabba, is about the ability to find edim to verify a get. Because at that time, by Rav Evyasar, because travel was considered normal between Babel and Eretz Yisrael. So now, because travel is so routine, unlike our Mishnah, where Rashi there highlighted that one of the reasons why we assumed that we needed, according to Rava, why we needed b'fanei nechtam was that it was shayaros, shein, and mitzuyas. There wasn't a lot of travel. So the Rav Evyasar is saying a historical fact. By his tkufa, the travel was so significant, there was no longer a need to worry about being able to be Makayim Mishtar, you'd be able to. Amar Rav Yosef, man leimalon, the Rav Evyasar bar Samcho, who says the Rav Evyasar is so great that we should listen to him. He's going against our Mishnah. We have to work ourselves into a pretzel to figure out as to how it could be. He's saying, is it Rava? Is it Ramba? It's got to be that maybe just the travel increase. How do we know the Rav Evyasar is so great? And furthermore, Ha'ihu de Shalach le Rabbi Yehuda b'nei Adam ha'olen misham lakan hein kaimo ve'atzman. He was the one who said this din about the fact that we don't need b'fanei nechtam anymore. But he was the one who also quoted a pasuk v'yitnu hayeled bezon of hayalda machru b'yayin v'yishtu v'chasav le below sirtud. He quoted a pasuk. He wrote it down, but he wrote it down in violation of a particular halacha. When a person is writing a Sefer Torah, when you get an Aliyah, when you look in the Sefer Torah, you'll see that there are lines that are etched into the cloth, they're etched into the parchment. Now that's a minimum requirement. You're obligated to have what's called sirtud. Sirtud is the etched lines. And what are the parameters? So it says our Gemara, Amar Rav Yitzchak, Shtayim kosvin, Shalosh ein kosvin. When you're only quoting 2 words, no problem, you don't need sirtut. But when you are quoting 3 or more words, then you do need sirtut. And b'masnisa tana shalosh kosvin, arba'in kosvin. And seemingly over here, Rav Evyasar did not do that the right way. So it must be that he's not such a Talmud Chacham. And maybe we should ignore him when he says that we no longer need to say b'fanei nechtam, b'fanei nechtam. So the Gemara says, not correct. 2 lines before the wide lines. Amar le Abaye atu kol delo yada hader Rav Yitzchak. Just because a person doesn't know this one line of Rav Yitzchak, therefore lav gavra rabahu. This is the litmus test. This single chazal of whether or not you know the din of sirtut of 2 words is no sirtut and 3 and more words is. There's a billion memras in Shas. There's so much to talk about. So why did this become the metric by which we measure greatness? Says the Gemara, I can understand if you want to tell me that this person's a dayan, he's a massive Talmud Chacham, and he doesn't know svara and halacha, then I understand. Then you're right, and you can actually ask a kasha on that. In other words, if you ask a dayan a question and he says, I don't know, okay, then he's not the biggest Talmud Chacham in town. However, Ha-Gemara, but this is a Gemara. This is a tradition. It's not logical. It's not a svara. It's a din, and it's a din that's quoted down in our ancestry. And perhaps the Gemara lo shmiele. Perhaps he never heard it. You can't hold it against him. We see this throughout Shas that sometimes, you'll see Amoraim saying, "Oh, that's a brisa. I never heard of that brisa. Thank you so much for telling me." They didn't know. That doesn't mean that they're not a Talmud Chacham. So that's the distinction the Gemara makes and says that Rav Eviasar, you can't hold him to be accountable for every brisa, for every piece of information, for every memra. You didn't know the one line of Rav Yitzchak. That's not a crime. But if you're a dayan, you have to know dinim. That is a problem. And furthermore, we have another beautiful story, and this will take us to the top of the next page. We have another beautiful story, says the Gemara, about Rav Eviasar. Rav Eviasar, who asking Mare al Yode, the master of the universe, even agreed to Rav Eviasar. The pasuk says, "Vatizne alav pilagsho." This is an awful story from Sefer Shoftim, which is referred to as Pilegesh Begiva. There was a husband who was very mean to his wife, to his Pilegesh, to his concubine, and he kicked her out of the house. She ended up being violated, and the tens of thousands of people were killed. Terrible story, a busha in our past, a stain. So says the Gemara of Eviasar Omar, what was it that triggered the husband that kicked out this Pilegesh? Zvuv matzala. There was a fly that was found. We'll see soon where the fly was found. If Yonasan argues on Rav Eviasar and Omar Nima Matzala, there was a hair that was found. Ve'ashkecher Rav Eviasar Eliyahu, and then Rav Eviasar bumped into Eliyahu and Nabi, and they had a conversation. Omar Le, my kavira Kodesh Baruch Hu. Rav Eviasar says to Eliyahu, "What is the Kodesh Baruch Hu doing right now?" So Eliyahu Navi says, "Amar Lai asik bepilegesh begiva." He's working through the sugya. Kodesh Baruch Hu is learning the sugya pilegesh begiva. Umayka Amar. So says Rav Eviasar back to Eliyahu, "Okay, tell me what he's saying. I'd love to learn from a Kodesh Baruch Hu." And then incredibly, Amar Le, what Eliyahu said that what Hashem is saying is Eviasar bani kachu. Omer quoted the sheet of Eviasar. Eviasar, my son, says X, namely that a zvuv was found, a fly was found, and that's why the husband was so upset. And Yonasan bani kachu Omer, and Yonasan, my child, he was of the opinion that a hair was found. So Rav Eviasar was shocked. Amar Le chas v'shalom u'mi'ika sveka kameshmaya. How could it be that there's a suffix in regards to a Kadosh Baruch Hu? A Kadosh Baruch Hu, what's a suffix? If I was right or Yonasan, I don't know if that would have been my first reaction. My first reaction would have been like, why is Kadosh Baruch Hu talking about me? But I guess Rav Eviasar thought he was shaykh. So that wasn't his problem. His problem was, why is the Kadosh Baruch Hu being done in regards to Eviasar versus Yonasan? It says the Gemara, a very, very, very important idea. Amar Le, Eliyahu says, don't worry. Elu ve'elu. Divrei Elokim Chaim. Both of these things are correct. Now, Elu ve'elu Divrei Elokim Chaim doesn't mean that Emes and Sheker are both correct. Beis Shammai is not Elu ve'elu Divrei Elokim Chaim. But it is possible to have two shitas within one idea that is still considered Torah. And we know that Beis Shammai is in a Mishnah. So here we're talking about something that is Torah. And the Gemara explains as follows. Zvuv Matzah v'lo hikpid. When the husband of this Pilegesh found the fly, he wasn't upset. But Nima Matzah v'hikpid. But when he did find a hair, then he was upset. Amar Rav Yehuda Zvuv b'ke'ara. Where did he find the fly? B'ke'ara, he found it in a bowl of food. V'nima b'osa makom, and he found Nima during an intimate moment by the osa makom. Zvuv mi'isusa. Zvuv is disgusting, but v'nima sakanta. But to have a hair during tashmish could be very dangerous. This actually can happen to newborns with very long hair. This has happened in Nebuch. It's very dangerous, where long hairs get wrapped around the aver. Happens on toes, happens on small anatomies on babies. So this is what the Gemara is talking about, that a hair can create a constriction and stop blood flow. Very dangerous. And Ika de Amre, some say, no, it really wasn't that breakdown of location as to where the hair was. But Idi v'idi b'ka'ara, really both the fly and the hair were found in food. Zvuv onsa, but we would assume that a fly is an ones. But v'nema pshiusa, and he got upset. And he said, the hair, you left it there on purpose. He got upset and he got angry at her and threw her out of the house. And then she got violated. So says the Gemara, based on this, Amar Rav Chizda la'olam al yatil odem ema yiseira b'soch beso. A person should be cautious not to put too much fear into their house. Shaharei pilegesh begiva hitel aleh ba'ila ema yiseira v'hipila kama revavos misra. That the husband of this pilegesh instilled too much fear in the house, and the result was that this woman was violated, and ended up being basically a civil war, and tens of thousands of people were killed. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, 4 lines from the bottom on Vav Amud Beis. Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that if a person is going to be too strict in their home, they're going to violate 3 different averos. They're going to violate all 3 of these. Gilui arayos, as we know, was the case of Pilegesh Begiva. She ended up getting violated. And shvichus damim is that many people in Klal Yisrael ended up being killed in addition to the Pilegesh. And v'chilul Shabbos, because some chilul Shabbos also took place. And Rashi over here includes this case. 6 lines, 5 lines from the bottom of the page on the inner margin. Dibur hamascha v'chilul Shabbos pamim shemad lekes ner o mivasheles mishechashecha mibnei emaso v'hu enu yodea. Perhaps the wife is so petrified of her husband that if she doesn't finish cooking, she's going to cook right through Shkia. And another example given here by the Meforshim in regards to the case of Gilui Arayos is a case scenario where a woman is not able to go to the mikvah. The mikvah is frozen, the mikvah is too cold, whatever the case may be, but she's too scared to tell her husband that she didn't go to the mikvah. So she may lie, and then they may end up being intimate, and that's an Isser Kares. It's an Isser Kares. That's a big problem. That's why we have to be careful with Ema Yisera. And of course, these are just 3 examples, but I think we all know the spillover effect of too much fear in a home. Amar Rabbi Barachana, that which we know from the Mishnayos in Perek Bamim Adlikin that we read on Friday nights, that as it gets dark out, we should say, Isartem Eravtem Edliku Esaner. Did you do Meiser and everything? Did you make the appropriate Eruvin? Did you light candles? It says the Gemara, this needs to be said gently, deep breath. This is not supposed to be intense. It's just supposed to be asked to make sure we're checking off all the appropriate halachic boxes, but it's not meant to instill fear. So that people can be, people are able to receive and listen. So, of course, we know who Klal Gadol, the Igeres Ramban writes about this, that when you speak softly, your words are much more likely to be heard. I did not know this. I never heard the specific din that he said in regards to that it needs to be done in such a gentle way. But I still, just on my own accord, I knew that this was the right way to do it. So when he was saying what Rav Ashi was saying is that when he would talk to his family on Fridays, Rabosai, Isartem, Eravtem, gentle, very calm, very gentle. Amar Rabbi Abo, La'olam al yatil adam ema yiser b'soch beso, shari adam gadol hitil ema yiser b'soch beso, v'chilu davar gadol. Says the Gemara, there was once a case scenario where someone was instilling too much fear in their home, and they ended up eating a davar gadol. We don't know what a davar gadol is yet, but he ended up eating something that he shouldn't have eaten. Ummanu, who was this? Reb Chanina ben Gamliel. So says the Gemara, okay, I understand Reb Chanina ben Gamliel, but the Gemara then says, do you think that this tzaddik of a man ended up actually eating something that he shouldn't? If in regards to animals of tzaddikim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu protects them that they'll do nothing wrong, then tzaddikim atzman lo kol shakein. All the more so in regards to the person themselves. There's no way that Reb Chanina ben Gamliel ended up eating something asur. It says the Gemara, Umay nihu, what type of food, what category of food was this, the davar gadol that we were concerned about? The Gemara says, that this was the type of food we were concerned about. We're going to stop right here on Zayin and Aleph, about 9-10 lines down at the word Shalach, and pick up again in Mir Hashem tomorrow with another shiur. Wishing you all a beautiful night.